With a great guitar build-off, you've got to provide evidence that you've built the guitar yourself, and for obvious reasons. So this video is more about evidence rather than any kind of tutorial, because if I'm honest, I don't have that kind of knowledge and currently I'm just making things up as I go along. I've designed most of it using Rick Replica and my CNC machine. There seems to be this assumption that CNC makes the process much quicker and much easier, but from my experience that's not always the case. It's taken me many weeks to design and make the neck, and something that I could have easily done by hand in a few days. But currently with a lack of hand tools, it's meant that I've had no choice but to do it this way, although eventually I did switch to some hand tools when I started to struggle with the 3D modelling, which was down to a lack of knowledge on my part. So the first job was to flatten the piece of rosewood I'll be using for the fretboard. The piece came rough sawn, so a few passes with a router bit creates a nice flat surface for me to work with. I also had to repeat this process with a piece of maple I was using for the neck, as I'd previously resawn it to the size on the bandsaw and it was looking really rough. The truss rod will be adjusted from the heel like on Rick's guitar, so a channel was routed out and finished with a chisel to make things nice and snug. I also needed to remove the piece from the machine and put it back afterwards, so I had to router some holes for some dowels. The rosewood was then glued to the maple. I machined a 9.5 inch radius to the fretboard and made a shallow profile pass to make sure the truss rod was in the right place. Then I used a small cutter to mark out the frets, which I'll hand cut later. I also marked out the nut slot and the fret dots. Rather than bandsaw the neck to the correct thickness, I used a CNC machine. I also drilled the peg holes, and as I can't add the Fender logo because of copyright, I decided to add my own. With the piece cut out, I made myself a fret levelling block to match the fretboard profile to make sanding it easier later on. Now I was hoping to hand carve the neck, but I don't have the tools needed, so I had to use my router table and a router cutter. I've previously had a near miss with this thing and it's lethal, so whilst I don't normally wear gloves when routering, I did today because I needed maximum grip to hold everything in place and made lots of careful, shallow passes. But the router bit only goes so far to carving the neck, so I had to use a combination of sanding tools, and with no woodworking files I had to use some of my metalwork files that I'd bought for restoring my classic car. But after many hours of sanding, the neck was pretty much done, and now all that's left to do is put it all together and finish the final video of the series, and fingers crossed I'll get to play the guitar.